We moved into the house on a windy Thursday afternoon, tucked away in a quiet Connecticut neighborhood where the trees leaned over like they were trying to whisper secrets. It was the kind of home people dream about. Wide porch, creaky charm, and too much history. Emily was glowing with excitement. I was just glad to finally have a backyard. But from the first night, something felt slightly off. On our first evening, Emily kept asking me why I was being so quiet. I thought maybe she was just tired from the move. She always got emotional when we were overwhelmed, but when I looked at her during dinner, she flinched like I'd glared at her. "Stop looking at me like that," she said, her voice low, almost scared. The next morning, she avoided eye contact while pouring coffee. "You shaved your beard?" she asked. I hadn't. I touched my face instinctively, feeling the same stubble I'd had all week. "No," I said slowly. She stared at me for a moment too long before nodding. "Right. Sorry." That was the first moment I thought something might be wrong with her. Over the next few days, it only got weirder. She started watching me like I was a stranger in our home. If I walked into the room too fast, she'd flinch. I caught her going through my wallet and phone late one night, but she claimed she was just checking something. Her hands were shaking. One afternoon I overheard her talking to someone on the phone in the upstairs hallway. "He looks like him." "But it's not him," she whispered, voice cracking. When I stepped into view, she hung up. So fast, it didn't even ring. Wrong number. She smiled, but I'd already seen the name. Her sister. Later that week, she left an old photo album open on the bed. On the page was a picture of us from our honeymoon. So my face looked different. It wasn't just age or angle. It was more like a softer version of me. She stood behind me, watching closely, like she was testing me. "You remember this trip?" she asked. I nodded. "Of course," I said, but I was lying that night. I woke up to the sound of her crying in the bathroom. The door was locked, and she didn't respond when I knocked. I sat outside for 20 minutes, listening to her whisper. What do I do? What if he hears me over and over again? She was unraveling. I finally convinced her to come to bed. She curled up beside me, without saying a word, clutching the pillow instead of me. I tried to tell her I loved her, but she turned her face to the wall. It felt as though I was sharing a bed with a roommate, not my wife. She whispered incessantly under her breath. The next morning she recoiled from my touch. "Your hands are colder," she said, backing away. "You don't smile the same. You don't even smell the same. You're not my husband," she whispered. "You're something else." I tried to talk to her calmly the next evening, but she wouldn't sit across from me. She stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes flicking to the front door, like she was planning an escape. "Tell me something only you would know," she demanded, trembling. I hesitated, my mind suddenly blank. I said, "Your favorite mug is the yellow one with the chip on the rim." She didn't answer. "You hate thunderstorms because of that camping trip with your dad. You always double notch your left shoe first." But she kept shaking her head. "No," she muttered. "That's what he would say." She pulled out a small notebook from the drawer and tossed it onto the table. "I've been keeping track," she said. "You stopped humming in the mornings. You started buttering toast on the wrong side. You leave the toothpaste cap off." Now her voice cracked. "You're close, but you're not him." Later that night, I found her in the garage, rummaging through moving boxes. She looked possessed, wild-eyed, and frantic. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice low. "I'm looking for our wedding video." She snapped. "I need to see him again." I brought her tea, and and sat beside her while she finally found the USB. She plugged it in, and we watched ourselves on the screen, laughing, dancing, kissing. "Look at how he holds me," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You don't touch me like that anymore." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away as if I'd burned her. "I don't feel you anymore," she said. "Even your heartbeat feels off." I tried to tell her she was imagining things, that the stress of the move was warping her thoughts, but even I was starting to feel something wasn't right. The house felt colder the next morning, and not just physically. There was a distance, a tension in the walls, like the house itself was listening. I found the bedroom mirror fogged up, despite no one using the shower on the glass. Someone had traced. "Who are you really?" I called out to her, thinking she was playing a cruel joke. But she was in the backyard, barefoot in the wet grass, muttering to herself. Tony stepped outside and touched her shoulder. She jumped, startled, staring at me like I'd appeared out of thin air. "Stay back," she warned. "I want to believe it's still you," she said, voice barely a whisper, but you're hollow like someone wearing his skin. Her words stung more than I expected, because even I was starting to question who I was. My dream had become silent. No sound, no people, just static. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, long after Emily had gone to bed. I stared at my own face, searching for something that didn't belong. I tilted my head, smiled, blinked. Nothing looked wrong, but nothing looked familiar either. I whispered, "Who are you?" and my breath fogged the glass. When I turned away, I could have sworn my reflection stayed a moment longer. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the foot of the bed, watching Emily shift restlessly under the blankets. Sometime past 3:00 a.m. She sat up, looked at me and said, "You're finally realizing it too." The next day I found her bags packed. "Emily, please," I begged. "I don't know what's happening to me." She reached up and gently touched my cheek like she was saying goodbye to something she used to love. "I believe you," she said softly, "but that doesn't make it better." She left that afternoon without another word. I stood at the window for hours watching the driveway like she might come back. The silence of the house grew louder, almost humming through the walls, and the next night I heard something in the crawl space. There was a faint scratching, almost rhythmic. I grabbed a flashlight and opened the hatch behind the hallway closet. Dust poured down, and something cold rushed past me. I don't know why, but I crawled inside. I tried to call Emily, but the line just rang endlessly. I even tried her sister voicemail. I stayed up all night watching the hallway, waiting for something to move. It did. At exactly 3:33 a.m., my bedroom door creaked open on its own. A figure stood in the doorway. My height, my shape, but not moving. I whispered Emily, but didn't react. It just turned and walked away. I followed it down the stairs, heart thudding so loud I thought I'd passed out. It stood in front of the living room mirror. I stood beside it. There were two reflections, but only one moved when I raised my hand. The other one stared blankly back, smiling faintly. I finally understood what she meant. I wasn't the same man. I was never the man at all.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy stories like these. I've got more real-life horror coming your way soon. Stay aware, stay safe, and always trust your instincts when something feels off, even if that something is you.
We moved into the house just after Christmas. Early January, cold and quiet. The place was older, a 1960s, one story with cracked paint and drafty windows, but it had charm. I remember telling my wife, it smelled like someone's memory. She laughed, but I wasn't really joking. The first few weeks were uneventful. mostly unpacking, replacing locks, figuring out which switches worked what. But the third week in, I started having these dreams. Always the same. I'm standing in the hallway, and someone is walking toward me. I can never see his face clearly. He doesn't speak or touch me, just walks past me. Into what's now our bedroom, closes the door, and disappears. It feels more like watching a loop than having a dream. The weirdest part is how real it feels. I always wake up disoriented, like I've been up all night. My wife said, maybe it's just stress. The dreams kept happening once a week at first. Then almost nightly, I tried staying up, drinking coffee, late, sleeping in the living room.
One morning I googled the property out of curiosity, half expecting nothing, but there it was, an old article buried on a local archive site. A man named Thomas Weller had lived here, and he passed away in 1993.
But that night, the dream changed. The man didn't go into the bedroom. He stopped beside me, like he was waiting for me to do something. Then I woke up, heart racing. I finally told my wife about the dream. In the article, she didn't laugh or roll her eyes like I expected. Instead, she asked quietly, "What time do you always wake up?" I said, 3:11. Her face went pale. That's when the carbon detector beeped for no reason. Last night, she whispered. That night, I dreamt again. Only this time, I wasn't alone. The man wasn't moving anymore. He just stood at the foot of the bed, staring at me. I could see a scar across his jaw. Now his eyes wide, like he was just as confused as I was. I woke up sweating the hallway outside. Our room was colder than the rest of the house. I checked the thermostat. It read 72. I stood there for a full minute, trying to shake the feeling that someone had just walked past me. The air felt heavier, like someone had just left the room. Not obsessively, just enough to satisfy the growing sense that something wasn't right. There wasn't much to go on. A few vague mentions in old property records, a retirement photo, and one note about found peacefully in his sleep. But it didn't feel peaceful in the dreams. When I brought up the name Thomas Weller, there was silence on the line. "Why are you asking about him?" she finally said. I told her about the dreams. She hung up. That's when I noticed something new. Every night, when I had the dream, I would wake up with my feet freezing, just my feet, like I'd been walking barefoot through the hallway. I checked the soles once they were dirty, like I'd stepped in dust. I placed my phone on the dresser and let it record through the night. The next morning, the file was corrupted, except for a few seconds near the end. In it, I could hear the floor creaking, slow steps moving past the bed. Then a soft voice whispered, "Do you see me now?" I showed the clip to my wife. She didn't say anything, just left the room and stayed in the kitchen for hours. That night I dreamt again, but this time I followed him through the hallway, through the bedroom door, into the wall. I woke up gasping on the floor behind the wall where the man always disappeared. There was an old bookshelf. I moved it. The wall behind it looked newer, patched differently than the rest. I tapped it, hollow. I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect to feel cold air coming through the seam. The next day, I borrowed a small hammer and started chipping at the wall. The dry wall broke away easier than I thought. Inside there was a small, shallow space, more like a sealed-off recess than a proper room. And in the dust I found a pair of old house slippers. I picked them up and felt a strange chill pass through my hands. Like static, there was something sewn into the inside. Initials. I left them there and backed away that night for the first time. I didn't have the dream. I thought maybe it was over. But 2 nights later, I woke up to find the slippers placed neatly by the edge of the bed. Neither of us had moved them. My wife refused to speak that morning. She just sat by the window and stared at nothing, twisting her wedding ring over and over again. I didn't sleep. The next night, I kept the hallway light on and sat upright in bed, staring at the slippers around 3:10 a.m. I felt the mattress shift slightly, like someone had just sat down. I didn't move the air around me. Felt still, but charged, like holding your breath too long. The next morning I found handprints on the bathroom mirror. Not from either of us. The shape was broader, older. The fingers slightly bent like from arthritis. My wife refused to go into the bathroom. After that she showered at the gym instead, and wouldn't come home until late. I opened the closet one day and found one of my own shirts missing. Later that week, it showed up in the attic, folded carefully under a tarp. We hadn't been in the attic yet. When I asked her if she had gone up there, she said, "I never go where he is." I finally broke down and called a local historian. She agreed to meet and brought a folder of clippings from the early 90s. Thomas Weller lived alone. She said never married. This house was his entire world. When I asked how he died, she paused. He was found sitting in the hallway. She showed me a grainy black and white photo. It was him. Same scar, same slumped posture I'd seen in the dreams, but in the photo, something else stood out.
That day, my wife packed a bag. "I don't think he wants both of us here," she said, voice calm, but cold. "I don't think he wants me here." I asked if she'd come back. She just said, "You'll know when he's finished with you." Then she left. The house is quiet now. I still dream, but he doesn't walk past me anymore. He sits across from me in the hallway, watches, breathes, waits.
I used to think I was afraid of him. Now I wonder if I've just taken his place, and someone else will be dreaming me next. We moved into the house last fall, a small 2-bedroom on the edge of a quiet Pennsylvania town. It was the kind of place you call a starter home, cheap, a little crooked, but charming. My husband Mark fell in love with it instantly. I liked it too. At first the weirdness started subtly. Mark began sleep-talking, which he'd never done before. At first, it was harmless murmuring, but over time, it became full conversations. Sometimes he'd laugh in his sleep, or whisper things, like she's coming in a tone that wasn't his. One night I woke up to find him standing at the foot of the bed, just staring at the corner of the ceiling. I asked him what he was doing, and he said, "She's watching the next morning." He had no memory of it. That was the first time I felt real fear. I brushed it off for a few days, blaming stress and poor sleep, but then I started hearing footsteps at night, soft, slow, like bare feet dragging along the hardwood hallway. Mark claimed he didn't hear anything, but I could tell he was lying. I began sleeping with the lamp on. That's when Mark started insisting it bothered her. I asked who her was, but he'd always shake his head and say, "Don't worry, she just likes things dark." I didn't want to push him. Something about his eyes felt distant. One night while brushing my teeth, I saw movement behind me in the mirror. A blur of white crossed the hallway, too fast to be Mark. When I turned around, nothing was there, but Mark called from the bedroom. "She doesn't like when you watch her." I finally sat Mark down and told him I wanted to leave the house, even if just for a few nights. He stared at me for a long time and said quietly, "But she won't let me." I asked who she was. He smiled vacantly and said she picked. I thought maybe he was having a breakdown. I called his sister, a nurse, and asked her to come talk to him. But Mark acted completely normal while she was here, laughing, joking, even cooking dinner. She left thinking I was exaggerating. I started thinking maybe I was too. But that night I found him sitting in the hallway talking to no one, just whispering, nodding like he was listening to someone I couldn't hear. I recorded it on my phone. When I played it back, his voice was clear, but there was another faint voice layered beneath his. The voice on the recording was almost childlike, soft and sing-song, like a lullaby humming beneath his words. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but it made my skin crawl. I deleted the file, thinking maybe I imagined it, but the fear stayed with me. That same night, Mark didn't come to bed. I found him standing in the backyard, barefoot facing the woods. When I touched his shoulder, he jumped and hissed, "Don't touch me when I'm with her." Then he blinked rapidly, like waking up from a deep dream. I begged him to come inside, and he finally did. But he wouldn't speak for the rest of the night, just sat in the living room, staring at the wall. When I asked who she was, he said she was here before you. That's when I knew this wasn't stress. Something was in this house. I tried to spend a night away, just one night at my sister's place, Mark agreed, but didn't come with me. At 2:47 a.m., he called. She said, "I can't sleep without you," he whispered. I heard a faint giggle in the background before the call dropped. I drove home shaking, praying he was just dreaming again. But when I arrived, he was sitting in the hallway again, this time cradling something in his arms. I thought it was a blanket, but as I got closer, I saw it was one of my nightgowns. He didn't look at me when I asked what he was doing. She says, "It smells like you," he mumbled. "She wants to feel close." I felt something behind me. For a split second, cold air brushing the back of my neck, like breath the hallway. Light flickered, then went out. Crawl space inside was a single Polaroid of a woman standing in our hallway, taken from a low angle. The photo was dated 1991. She looked blurred, but her eyes were clear and staring straight at the camera. I showed the photo to Mark. He smiled slowly and said, "That's her." I asked how he knew. He said, "She told me she used to sleep where we sleep." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "She wants you gone." He added, "This house isn't big enough for three that night." I didn't sleep. I locked the bedroom door while Mark was in the kitchen though. I'm not sure why. I don't think I was scared of him exactly, but I didn't trust who he was becoming around 3:00 a.m. I heard him whispering outside the door. He was saying my name softly, over and over. "Come out. She wants to see you," he said gently. "She promised not to hurt you if you leave now." I didn't respond. I just sat on the floor, clutching the phone with shaking hands, praying for morning. The next day, I found scratch marks on the inside of the bedroom door, 3 vertical lines dragged down from eye level to the floor. Mark said he didn't remember anything. "She gets upset when you ignore her," he added. "She says, you're making this harder than it has to be." I packed a bag while Mark was in the shower.
I didn't care if he stayed. I just needed to get out. But as I reached the front door, every light in the house turned off at once, and I heard a voice behind me whisper,
"You weren't invited." When I turned, Mark was standing halfway down the hallway, dripping wet, his face blank. She said, "You try this," he said, as water pooled at his feet. "She told me to stop you." I stepped back, clutching the doorknob. "Mark," I whispered, "this isn't you." Something changed in his expression. Just for a second, his eyes flickered like someone waking from a long nap. Then he dropped to his knees and whispered, "Please help me," behind him. I saw her, just for a flash, pale, watching from the dark of the hallway, smiling faintly. I ran. I don't remember unlocking the door or crossing the porch. I just remember the cold air outside hitting my face. Like freedom, I stayed in my car for hours. Mark didn't follow. He didn't call. I never went back inside that house. The house is still there. I drive past it sometimes, usually around sunset. There's always a light on in the hallway. Even when the blinds are drawn, the curtains sometimes shift on their own, like someone peeking out, watching, waiting. I heard through the realtor that Mark never left. He pays the mortgage, keeps the lawn trimmed, but never opens the door to visitors. They say he talks to someone constantly. Even in public, he smiles when no one's there. He always leaves the second bedroom window open. I don't know if he's still in there or if she is what's left, but I never hear from him anymore.